So if you can hear Sam, that means the sound's better.
You just echoed when you spoke, though.
Do we think we're ready?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all who wish to pledge allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will recommend the agenda adjustments or the request for agenda adjustments. No, I will just note that we have a board member who had to attend remotely tonight, so the votes will be by roll call. Next up, we have the minutes from April 11th. I would make a motion to approve the minutes from April 11th as presented. Is there a second? A second. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Kevin, how do you vote?
Aye. Yeah. Yes.
Aye. Noah?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye, passes 5-0. Next up are warrants. I would make a motion to approve regular warrant 21, payroll warrant 21, and the March May 1st warrant. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Kevin?
Sorry. Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Noah? Aye. Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye, passes 5-0. The floor is open for public comment. Would anybody like to make a public comment? Not seeing anybody. If you do want to make a public comment, go ahead and unmute right now. Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll go ahead and move on. Acknowledgements, Kevin.
Just want to acknowledge the amazing spring concert. Did I acknowledge this last time? I can't remember.
I don't think we've met since then.
Okay, good. So I want to acknowledge, yeah, the amazing spring concert that was held at the PAC. Again, a great venue. You know, the ASA Elementary School spring concert was amazing. It was amazing to see all the teachers and the administrators that were involved and all the community come together to hear that work. Just always great when the community comes together to appreciate the work of RSU 26. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, just acknowledge our appreciation for what looks to be like an anonymous donation to the middle school, the amount of $1,500 to be put towards their fundraising efforts. So whoever or whomever that was, we're appreciative and thank you.
Great, thank you. I would like to acknowledge we had 6 applications for the student board representative. In the end, it was a tough decision. All 6 were extremely well qualified, and any other year, we would have been happy to have any of them sitting with us. But Meredith and I did have to pick it down to 2, so we'll have them sitting with us next time. But I would like to just acknowledge and appreciate everybody who applied. It's putting yourself forward for public service when you're not guaranteed to get picked is not always an easy thing to do, and not that many people do it, so I appreciate that. Noah,
Nothing at this time.
Mark,
I've got nothing at this time.
Meredith,
I just also listed in the agenda, there's an acknowledgement of a grant that Jessica Archer wrote and submitted and was successful in getting funding from the NEA. It was for $4,000 and it was to support some of the initiatives that they have going at the middle school, Riot Buddies and Riot Cookery. So because of the amount, we should probably we need to approve this item as well.
go ahead and move on to director reports. Lisa.
Good evening, everybody. It's been kind of a breakneck speed to the beginning of the last leg, it feels, for this school year. We're working hard on completing evaluations for students. We're also working on, or I've been working on completing my summative evaluations. I have several new staff to complete that on, and just working in those additional meetings for teachers. They've been real troopers, and I'm very much appreciating that. At this time, we're also doing a lot of transition meetings. We have our incoming kindergarten meetings set up for May. We have had several of our meetings for students moving from ASA to OMS, and we also continue to have those for students moving from OMS to OHS. So it's kind of a fun rite of passage to participate in that with families as we prepare for that next step. We do have a couple interviews set up for some positions that are open for next year. We've got a couple of interviews for folks next week. So thank you for those that are helping out with that. We're also preparing, for our summer work. I already have met with several staff that are doing the coordinating in the buildings, getting information out to families. That's beginning. We've had a lot of interest from staff members that would like to work this summer. So there's a lot to coordinate. We're looking at coordinating, what the rooms are and who's doing what, and having lunch and having breakfast and transportation. So it's hard to believe that it's already that time of year, but those plans are underway. And that is all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? We'll go ahead and move on to the Director of Learning, Susan.
Good evening. Lots going on in the world of Director of Learning. Lately, we've been doing things to make sure our I's are dotted and T's are crossed when it comes to federal requirements, as well as getting ready for the new through-year assessment for the state assessment. And Richard Glencross and the middle school folks will be ready to start that next week, with other schools following the week after. In addition to the curriculum and DEI work that I had mentioned in my written report, I also wanted to let you know that I took advantage of the opportunity of being invited on a field trip today and spent part of the time with some of our 8th grade students who are taking the writing class with Katie Cork, and we got to visit 4 water spots and take samples and bring those back to the lab at the Penobscot Indian Nations Tribal Resources, which was just a wonderful experience for our students. They'll be analyzing those. They're being incubated tonight, and they'll take a look at it tomorrow and then put together a variety of different data reports to share their research and what they've learned. So I'm looking forward to their final product. And I would really like to mention a big thank you to the Penobscot Indian Nations Natural Resources, particularly Angie Reed and Chantel Neptune, who've spent a lot of time helping us and helping our kids. We're also working on inviting students to apply for accelerated English language arts for current 7th graders and current 8th grader or 6th graders, current 6th and current 7th graders, so that they'll be having a chance to do an application. And Katie Cork, Richard Glencross, and I will be reviewing those applications and their essays and things to make recommendations for them for next year. And that's pretty exciting to see. And then tomorrow afternoon, evening, Carrie Wyman and I are heading down to Massachusetts with 6 of our teachers from the Asa Adams School for the Massachusetts Reading Conference. And we're excited to be attending that this year. The author of the Stamped for Children is one of the keynote speakers, Dr. Sonia Cherry Palin, I think is how we say her last name. And in addition to that, a big focus is also on the science of reading, and the author Jan Birkins from Shifting the Balance, as well as Wiley Blands, who does quite a bit of work around the science of reading, will be presenting, and we're looking forward to learning some new things and bringing those back to ASA and the rest of the district.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Where in Massachusetts?
It's in Quincy.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening. A few items to report. First, I want to report a resignation. We received a resignation from Eliza Ford, our art teacher at Asa Adams, effective end of the year. We appreciate Eliza's time with us in art and physics and wish her well. Carrie plans on moving forward with an advertisement this week to go ahead and get that posted. So in addition to this now, new opening that we have, Lisa has the 2 special ed openings she's currently advertising for, and 1 ed tech retirement that we know of at this time in the Title I program at ASA. So that's currently what we have for openings for next year. Want to also update on the VZ agreement. In further conversation with VZ's decided not to pursue an agreement at this time. They do plan on continuing the bus service. I think the agreement, the hoops that we have to go through for this agreement are just more than either of us probably have time to execute before our respective town municipal referendum, our town meetings that this process would have to go through. So we're just going to continue to work with VZ and Glimmer and all the other communities as we do. And VZ will reach back out to us if they want to pursue something in the future. I sent an email out to staff. I know it was posted out on social media, but our last day of school, I feel comfortable saying, is June 13th. We used 2 of our weather days this year. And so the last student day will be an early release on that day. So it backed it up for 2 of those days in the calendar. So June 13th. And Brian mentioned during acknowledgements about our student board rep application and interviews. We're really pleased with that. And I wanted to announce that our board reps for next year will be Marissa McLaughlin, who will be a senior next year, and Dorsa Chavidi, who will be a junior next year. And they will begin May 9th, our next board meeting. The other thing that I listed on the agenda for my report are 2 items that we need to review together and just give an update really around some of our COVID relief money and our COVID safe return to school plan. These are plans that are required under the federal relief money, specifically the ARP ESSER 3 money, to continue to have in place until we are done with that relief money. And they're supposed to be updated every 6 months. When I did the recent performance report, I realized we were overdue on that 6-month review. And so I bring those to you tonight. And when Brian and I looked at the return to school plan, I think we were both pleasantly, just felt affirmed that we really designed our return to school plan with a kind of thinking to the future and not having them become dated so quickly as they might have been in previous years when things were changing so fast. So when I put in your packet tonight a revised version of this document that really just suggests we change a few things. And, you know, when I did this, I went to the, CDC, the federal CDC page to see if there was any updated guidance. There's really not updated guidance. The most recent update is October of 22 for school guidance. Knowing that the public health emergency ends on May 11th, I'm really not sure. We haven't received any information about how that may change recommendations to schools. If there's anything significant, certainly I would bring this back to you around that, but no one around us has heard anything about that. But we do know that we have to keep these guidelines in place through the ARP funding window. So a couple of the opening, or actually one of the opening sections that we had just put in as I think a centering or a focus statement from the CDC guidance, I decided to change that out because one of the ones that I have crossed out there indicated that it was really just from an earlier phase in our probably transition from last year to earlier this school year, and added in these new quotes from the guidance that I thought better reflected maybe the time that we're in now. That reflects, you know, that many people have immunity or have some protection due to vaccination or previous infection, and really just reflected what that says about where we are as a, you know, community. The only thing I changed in the safety measures is the under number 7, I've eliminated the district notification through. Did you hear that?
I heard it.
I'm not sure.
Somebody got down.
Okay. The district notification through a dashboard. That dashboard, we're not getting notified as much. It just doesn't feel valuable anymore. And I actually ceased using the dashboard some time ago. So I feel like that's we need to transition that out of our guidelines as well. But in reviewing this, we felt like everything else really still stands the test of time for where we are. So I just bring this to you to consider as an update to this plan.
Is the goal of this to be in effect for next year?
Well, until there's some new guidance, probably. I think we would probably soon receive something new, given the shift out of the public health emergency. And when we get that, I think we can look at this again, but because we were overdue for a review, I felt like we really needed to have this review tonight.
So we don't need to change it for the next academic year. We can leave those dates in.
We can, I mean, we could just continue to roll these forward if nothing else changes. Any concerns, questions, ideas about that? The other document is the use of funds document. This document that I put together for you tonight, it takes what we initially put together for ARP. That was the last round of ESSER funding, and updates what we've done with it so far and what we plan to do for the remaining amounts. You may remember that for this particular, this last round of COVID money, there was a requirement for a 20% set aside for learning loss. So you see highlighted in red on the table here, the projects that were targeted for learning loss. And we exceed that requirement with how much we have either spent or plan to spend on learning loss projects. The remainder, what we started out with in our budget here has ended up not being exactly what we needed it for, because in earlier rounds of COVID relief funds, the same thing happened. So we pushed some of these projects back into those earlier rounds, like the OHS Corps Ed Tech, the ASA, RTI interventionist, and the OHS credit recovery Ed Tech, and the social worker. We pushed all of those positions into ESER 2 to start this year because we needed to finish that relief money first. And we're just finishing up that pot of money, so to speak, and are shifting these to ESER 3 now to finish the year. And we've wrapped up most of the remainder of the money to be used for our ventilation project. And that's something that we really saw a need for, especially as we got those initial cost estimates back. And as you know, have kind of gone back to do some redesign work on that, but this large amount of money that's left, other than the few things you see in the planned expenditures that we're finishing up the items in red this fiscal year. And then the staff wellness will continue into next year as far as the money goes, will be dedicated to that larger ventilation project down at ASA. So that's where we stand. We have until September of next year, 24, to obligate these funds, and then I think to the end of December to actually spend them. So, any feedback or questions about that? Okay. That's all I have for you in this section of my report. Do we want to shift into budget? Oh, you have a question?
I have a couple questions on the other item.
The safe return to school.
No, like the VZ and the revocation.
Okay,
But yeah, so I guess, but the VZ said that, just to be clear, like it wasn't anything we put forward, it was just a like structural problem, with the system
right.
and that like. So they're sort of informally kind of agreeing to work together and then see if it comes up.
Well, in
Yeah.
in the same way that other districts around us work
Yeah.
together, like Glenburn is transitioning out of a RSU withdrawal agreement this year as well with us. And will be in the same relationship with us that other sending towns are, like Milford. And so there's a lot more involved with just a high school agreement like this than you would think. And it just kind of came down to this is probably not realistic to have all this in place prior to the referendum.
What would have had to been approved by the voters of both towns.
Right.
Which is some.
Yeah, there's quite a few differences.
But they're sort of in principle would have been okay with the term. Like.
Yeah, yes, that wasn't an issue. It was really the legal hoops that had to be clear that we ran on timeline.
Right. And then I guess on the resignation, it's sad to see her, I know she put a lot into the kids. The work, and I guess I'm wondering about looking forward to the hire. Are we gonna, or is there a representative on that hiring committee? Or-
Yes,
I mean,
yeah, we'll come to you to ask who wants to serve on the committee,
Forget how this.
probably next meeting, because
Yeah.
we're putting out the ad now, we'll let it run for a couple of weeks and then start interviewing. So the next time we meet, we'll be looking for, I mean, we could do that now if folks are ready. There's no probably downside
Might as
to,
well, just in
yeah,
case you're ready.
while we're talking about it.
Is it two or one?
Just one for we already have, I think Kevin's serving on the committees with Lisa for special ed. And so this would be for the ASA art position.
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested.
Okay. So Noah is interested. All right, so Gary, you have your board representative for that hiring committee. Excellent, thanks for bringing it up.
Any other comments on any of the dinner report or we move on to budget? Again, just to set context, tonight's the night where we officially sign off on the pieces of the budget that we actually have control over. And then basically give Lynn instructions to work in supervision with the lawyers to draw formal warrant articles, and to take things to the budget meeting. And then take things to the election. The budget meeting is. Should have it up in my head, is it May 16th?
No, it's the 23rd.
Is that on our existing board calendar?
Yes,
And is it-
Yeah, May 23rd at 6 p.m. So anybody who's in the audience. That's the budget meeting, and then the vote is the second Tuesday in June, which would take us to the
It's the 13th,
13th.
yeah.
Are we gonna do it in a pack again this year?
Actually, isn't it? Yeah, we have to clarify if Scenes and Songs is happening that night, and if it is, then we need to go to the cafeteria, so will you check on that, Rachel? Because I noticed there's a conflict on the calendar. But I'm not sure that they're actually performing that night,
Who's the date?
the third, the
23rd.
23rd,
Safety then?
yes.
So that's the context, is this is kind of, really last meeting was the last chance to speak up, but if there is something desperately wrong. We could make Lynn pull her hair out and change it tonight, but the goal is not to change it tonight, but just to kind of give a final nod to it and to vote to it. To instruct the creation of the warrants, so. That's where we're at, Mary, if you want to give us the recap.
Sure, I'll just share a screen so we can all be looking. At the same document, so. This is the document that we provided tonight. It's, you know, an updated set of the same structure we've looked at all along. I guess, let me back up one. For one moment and share a different document first that you don't have. I just want to remind you of this document though. So last time we met, we spent a lot of time looking at this document, right? And so at the end of the discussion, the board you all gave us direction that you wanted to go with this recommendation that was offered here to take all the priority 1 and 2 reductions, including adding back 25% of the professional development, take all the staff reductions listed except the ACE behavior coach, have a school lunch contribution reduction of $25,000, and then add the capital improvement in the local budget of $200,000 for a resulting local tax increase of $435,000 and some change. So we executed that. And like in between other meetings, we've said this. In addition to this, we learn more information. The further we get, or the closer we get to tonight, the more things come into focus. And so, you know, we got more information that helped us just refine other numbers a bit. So what you see tonight is not 435 and change, it is 442 and some change is the actual local tax increase. And, you know, it's not one thing that caused that change, it's I don't know, then probably 10 things that caused that change. Probably the biggest thing that comes to my mind is we learned of our workers' comp rate, and it was a bigger increase than we have had. And so it resulted in about $25,000 actually of increase. And so that was an add, and then there were some other takeaways. So the result of all of that, plus what you approved last meeting for the reductions and the recommendation, lead us to tonight providing this final look at the total increase of $442,151.34. So I don't want to, you know, go through everything again. I think the highlights were on that reduction page. And, you know, at this point, we have our insurance numbers are finalized, and so that's very clear. And the following pages that you see here, in particular, this one have been updated. And interestingly, because I asked Lynn about this today, I found this interesting is, you know, we did quite a bit on professional development, trimming out some funds from those budget requests. But in some cost centers, it really didn't result in a big change from what they had in the budget this year. Like, for example, in regular ed, there is a line right here, decrease in staff training lines overall of $7,734.73. But in special ed, I think the difference was $900 is what it ended up being compared to last year, because this is comparing last fiscal year to this fiscal year. So that's what you see on this page, how it compares to last fiscal year, rather than from the last FY24 budget proposal to this one. The other thing that we had not reported to you yet is the dental insurance came in and it was actually slightly above what we estimate was 5.33%. So that's really the summary of new items. I would say that, you know, I feel good about where we've landed here. In particular, I feel like we've finally gotten to the point that we've been working to get to around funding capital improvement. To have a chance of, you know, making significant improvement on our 10-year plan that we've shared with you earlier in this budget process. And, you know, if we move forward with this tonight, it'll allow Bill to begin scheduling things. We know we have a couple of hurdles to get through with the budget meeting and referendum, but we really do need to begin scheduling things now to get work planned and lined up. So Brian, would you add anything to that, or Lynn?
On the process, I mean, small changes, but good that we're keeping it up to date. I would just kind of contextualize the whole budget. I know I've said this a few times, but we have people in the audience that weren't here before. So the thing that we actually have control over is the expenses. And let's see, I guess it did well, they did it on the revenues, but it's the same difference as total expenses is a 5.3% increase, but actually that's against a 2% increase in student enrollment. I mean, student enrollment numbers, it's hard to figure out which numbers to use, but using the numbers from last year's ED 279 versus this year was almost 2%, 1.97%, 95%. And so, you know, at a per capita level, that's a 3.3% increase in expenses per student. And you look at inflation at about 7.5%, that's half of inflation. So I certainly feel like we've done very strong due diligence on controlling expenses. The tax impact really comes down to what the state does with their funding. And, you know, they certainly did increase the funding formula a bit, but, you know, it didn't keep up with inflation. And so the net impact on taxes looks like it's 442,000, which we won't know until the evaluations are completed in August, but it's about 3/4 of a mil. So both of those numbers, if you compare to what's happening in districts around us, I think look pretty strong, very strong. I also think it's important to put that 3/4 mil increase in the context of the history of what this district has done in the last 5 years. We had a 0 mil increase, right? Flat. We had another year where we had a 1 mil decrease. And if you look at the net from 5 years ago to today, and again, this depends on mills, and I'm using a mill based on a constant property valuation rate, so changes in property values is separated out from mill rates. But if you look at that, we have had in 5 years a 1.57 mil increase, which sounds like a lot, but you have to remember that's in the context of the voters approving a 1.9 mil bond. Right?
If you take the bond out, we've actually.
Take the bond out, we've actually dropped about 0.3 of a mil over that 5-year period. So I think that's
Inflation running.
with inflation
7, 8,
and
9%.
student enrollment both going up. Yeah. So I feel like it's a record we can be proud of. And as Meredith mentioned, not only did we get that major capital instruction, but we actually, I think for the first time in my time on the board, probably for the first time in 20 years, it got a maintenance plan where we're going to take care of the buildings at the level the buildings need to be taken care of to sustain them through time. So I think that's a pretty strong record of what's happened. You know, I'm not thrilled with the bottom line number of 3/4 mil, but you put it in the context of what's happening with state funding and what's happening in districts around us. You put it in the context of how tightly we constrained expenses, and you put it in the context of our long-term record of actually decreasing taxes once you take the major construction project, which was approved by voters out. And I think it looks pretty strong. At this point, I'll go ahead and make a motion to, I guess, phrase it as to authorize the staff to go ahead and begin working on the warrant articles. Actually, you don't have to vote because it's going to come to the board for the warrant articles.
Actually, you vote, I think, the next meeting
You
when
vote
you
on the warrant
sign.
articles.
Tonight is just, you're directing us to
Yeah.
create the warrant articles based on this budget we're
Yeah.
presenting tonight.
Everybody okay with instructing staff to prepare the warrant articles as presented tonight?
I would just add that, you know, for the audience, that we did this without Yeah, as you said last time, without cutting any of the education programming that we valued, right? Like, that was what we did, right? That thing, we didn't cut anything that the teachers needed or anything that's gonna reduce like the core arts or education or pieces like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some shifts to track student enrollments and down to the grades, but there's no cuts you can point to, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think being responsive to shifting enrollments is something that we've been committed to for a few years and been showing that, we add staff where it's needed when we see that happening, but we also have to shift in the other direction. We see downward trends and we're doing some of that this year. And I know that that does not come easily, that has an impact. It's not a zero impact, but we still can offer the programming that, we're committed to with the shifts that we have included in this budget.
Okay, that represents a lot of work, certainly for the board, and also Meredith, Lynn, and the administrators. That's a huge amount of work, and honestly, it turned out much better than I think we had any right to expect. So I really appreciate the work that went into that, and I'm grateful for that. And pretty much at this point, it's into the hands of the voters. So I do think we need to continue to communicate with voters. So I encourage you all to have your conversations with friends and neighbors about the context of what we did. Anything else on budget? Okay. We'll go ahead and move on next to OHS data presentation.
I asked Meredith to bring this information to us tonight. We last year, as we worked on looking into the schedule at OHS, committed to circling back to take a look at how things were going with it a year later, and to examining, any data that we could share to kind of quantify the change and the impacts of those changes. So Meredith has a presentation she's going to walk us through tonight, and she's shared this with the high school staff, and they've had a chance to interact with it, and now they're bringing it to you tonight. So Meredith.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but I think I need permission for that, Meredith.
Rachel, you can do that.
Great, thank you.
Make it over.
Okay, so are folks able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. So I'll start by saying that this, so since beginning the build of this presentation, it has been an evolving document. And as researchers, you're likely familiar with what tends to happen when you start digging into information, that the inquiry reveals questions that you didn't know needed to be asked. And it really is just a matter of deciding how much time and capacity you have for following each thread as it emerges. And so as a result, this has been an evolving presentation that I want to assert is a snapshot, an incomplete snapshot in time. But by nature of its evolution, it has evolved even from the, as I have talked with folks and gotten feedback from the version that I shared with Meredith yesterday. So I will, at the conclusion, send a revised PDF so that can be redistributed. There have been a few additions based on, pieces that folks wish that they had seen. So for those of you who were with us last spring, you may recall the OHS scheduling committee and how it evolved as an inquiry into, how we are using this, most valuable resource of time up here at OHS. And after a lot of data digging, with the help of a large committee of stakeholders and lots of discussion about what that data digging revealed, we arrived at the end of our inquiry at the following list of priorities. What we didn't know when the conversation started was that reducing the amount of time students were spending in study hall really was a top tier need. And in addition to that, we strove to increase instructional time, maintain the protected status of our performing arts classes. Before this year, we had a block called Muse that was a block during which only performing arts and visual arts classes were offered. And that by last year had emerged as a period during which 75% of our students were in study hall. We wanted to create a system of academic support for students. We wanted to maintain advisory, and we also aspired to align our color days with days of the week in order to remove the obstacle that exists for students right now of enrolling in in-person classes at the University of Maine, because of the way in which an alternating day doesn't really lend itself well to a Monday through Friday schedule up there. In my next couple of slides, I'm going to share essentially what the shift in schedule that we made this year has done to the minutes during which students are in instructional blocks. But before I do that, I wanted to underline a few caveats. One, students who have IEPs who are in supported study hall are excluded from the sample. When we ran this data last spring, the wide variety of supported versus non-supported study halls made accounting for those minutes for those students really difficult. So they're excluded here. Students in our alternative program core are excluded because their schedules are individualized and nuanced in a way that really precludes inclusion with this set. And finally, advisory and win-win minutes are excluded as instructional time in this metric. And this is something that has been a hot topic of discussion among the faculty up here as we have begun looking at this data. Last year with our schedule with Muse was an instructional period. It was a time during which roughly half of the faculty in the building monitored a study hall. Roughly half of the faculty in the building did not have a responsibility on alternating days. And then our performing arts and visual arts faculty were instructing for the full period. This year, win-win, for those without folks at the high school who may be unfamiliar with this acronym, it's actually an acronym we stole from ASA last spring that means what I need and what you need. It's a 30-minute intervention block that happens 4 days a week from 10:40 to 11:10. On the 5th day, which actually is Monday, we have advisory during that time. But the system that we put in place is a system of tagging that allows teachers to request students for both intervention and enrichment opportunities during those 30 minutes. So we have a running spreadsheet every month that has every student's name on it, and a teacher can indicate, I want to see this student for this reason. Students report to advisory. From advisory, they are dispatched to the place they were requested. If they weren't requested, then they remain in their advisory for that 30 minutes. So that is the structure. Because it's an intervention and enrichment block, it is not being counted as instructional time. So at this point last year, when we looked at how students were spending their time in the building, this is what we found. As a frame of reference, last year we were running a 9-block period over the course of 2 days, with Muse as a period that met every day, but every other period met on alternating days. If a student was taking 7 classes, then they had 187.5 minutes of study hall time per week if they were also enrolled in an arts class. But if they weren't enrolled in an arts class during Muse block, then that 187 had 250 study hall minutes added to it. We require students enroll in at least 6 classes to have a full schedule. And so a student with 6 classes would have 375 minutes of study hall per week, which would be 1 study hall each day. But if they were not enrolled in an arts class, that added another 250 minutes onto that number. And so that gives some context for the percentage of instructional time that last year students were spending in study hall. As you can see, the trend was upward markedly as students advanced from their 9th grade year to their 12th grade year. Also included in those minutes are PRIV minutes. So students are eligible for either junior or senior PRIV if they have a GPA of 85 or above. And that is something that they can access for 1 block only, either the first block of either a maroon or white day or the last block of a maroon or white day. But because those minutes are not meaningfully engaged in the building, those are counted in that study hall / PRIV time. Not counted in that time, students who are enrolled in university classes, students who are on the tech team or work as library aides, students who work as, we have a small handful of students working as teaching assistants in certain classes. Because that is considered meaningful engagement, those minutes are not included in this count. When we ran the numbers this year, as of Q3, this is what we found. So as you can see, the shift that we have made in the schedule has had a significant impact in the amount of instructional time that students are spending either in study hall or PRIV. The impact was greatest in the upper grades, 11th and 12th grade. And I think notably this evened out what this looks like across grade levels. So instead of having the steady increase from 9th to 12th grade, now we have some increase, but not a huge increase from 9th to 12th grade. So one question that came up when we had the when we did the faculty presentation of this data was thinking about, okay, well, what really has the impact been? So if these minutes, if we have taken away Muse and added win-win and changed our structure for advisory, what exactly has that looked like? So I created this slide. This is new from the faculty presentation, just to illustrate what has the distribution looked like. So I've already talked about how, previously students had 250 minutes a week in a Muse study hall if they were not in a performing arts or visual arts class. This year, that number, the number of minutes that students can access win-win each week is 120 minutes. That's a time period during which every faculty member is accessible to students. And it's a time period that every student can access unless they are in UTC. UTC students either arrive or leave during that block. And our afternoon UTC students eat lunch during that time. So they are a population that doesn't have the access enjoyed by everybody else. Last year, our advisory period was at the beginning of the day for 10 minutes every day. This year, advisory is 30 minutes every Monday. Because of the challenge of meeting the needs of students with supported study hall designated in their IEP in a context where there are students spending so much time in study halls, this time last year, most of our students with supported study hall designations on their IEPs also had a balance of unsupported study hall minutes. For some students, that was during the Muse study hall. For other students, it was during other blocks. But one of the most significant impacts of this change has been that now we literally only have 5 students in the building who have a supported study hall in their IEP, who also have one block of unsupported study hall. There are 2 students in 9th grade and then 1 student in 10th, 11th, each of 10th, 11th, and 12th grades who fall into that category. So, if you're thinking about a student for whom that supported study hall time is the key to success, you can imagine what for many of those students might be the challenge of unsupported study hall time, and how this has been a significant change in the building. In terms of the distribution of instructional minutes specifically, with our 69-minute blocks last year, a student with the 6 credit enrollment not enrolled in a MUSE class had 414 minutes of instructional time every 2 days. In 8 classes, that was 552 minutes. This year, those numbers are 450 minutes every 2 days for a student in 6 classes and 600 minutes every 2 days for a student in 8 classes. So that was, sort of the pivotal change that we committed to reflecting on when we made the shift last year. And it was the invitation into this inquiry. And as I think we all can appreciate, whether by nature of our own roles in education or the perspective that we have through the kids in our lives who are being educated in this district, this time period is fundamentally different than what it was like before COVID. And we don't yet, I feel like every day I have a new understanding of what that means. And so inevitably, a part of this inquiry became trying to figure out what are the ripple effects of these changes that we made, and what are some of the other facets of the life world of this building that are impacting how it feels to teach and learn here. How does it feel to be part of this community, and why might we be feeling this way in the current circumstance? In light of that, I have the following series of slides that pulled different from data from different places in order to offer perspective. And by no means am I asserting that this captures it, right? Instead, I'm asserting that these are all pieces that we can hold together in our accounting in an effort to understand what the life world of our school is like now, and how we can continue to make it better. In our current circumstance, we have 106 students in this building who either have an IEP or an IEP referral, and 83 students in the building either with a 504 or who are in the 504 referral process. And what that amounts to is that 50.5% of students in this building have learning needs that require accommodations by teachers. So if this were an entirely heterogeneous building, then you could anticipate that roughly half of every class would need some sort of individualized instruction or differentiation. However, we aren't a completely heterogeneous building. And as a result, there are classes, regular education classes in this building where the percentage of students with specific learning needs approaches 80%. And that is no small burden for our teachers to bear, especially because this is something that is continually evolving. I want to thank Lisa Smith, Pam Parsons, and Jill Conley for helping me gather this data. And each of them can tell you about the fact that these numbers are continually evolving, which means that the needs of our students are continually changing in a way that teachers have to respond to, and that is a huge lift. 52 of those 83 students with 504s or in the 504 referral process have 504s for mental health reasons. And this is another number that I want to contextualize, because in order to be one of those 52 students, you need to have parents who have somehow sought for you a mental health diagnosis And that has then been advocated for to us as a building. And that has brought together a team of people to meet and review the diagnosis to come to a determination that your mental health needs require certain accommodations. We have many students in this building for whom that process has not happened, and so who are excluded from this number. And so that number I feel like is a little bit misleading. Also excluded from that number are students included in that 106 with IEPs who also have mental health needs. Because those students are also not specifically here identified as having a mental health need requiring an accommodation. As educators, I imagine that you can appreciate the lift that this creates for our building and the day-to-day responsibility that comes with helping these students feel safe and capable of learning at school, so that we can continue to deliver instruction. A little bit of a further drill down just to further characterize this. Overall, 14% of our building has a 504 that is for a mental health need of some kind. Our highest percentage is in the 11th grade. 17% of the 11th grade has a 504 for mental health needs. Our highest percentage of students requiring supported study hall time are in the 10th grade. 29% of our 10th graders are enrolled in either 1 or 2 supported study hall periods. In conversations with Kathy Van Dolman, we talked about how one of the trends in this building is that, students will come to us with IEPs, certainly. And we also have a cohort of 9th graders each year who have perhaps needed IEPs in the past, but haven't had them. And so then we have, that number grow to this, 29% in 10th grade. But then over the course of students enrollment here, the goal, of course, is to help them cultivate those executive functioning those executive function skills that allow them to graduate from that kind of support in order to have individual success beyond the walls of OHS. And so one of the conversations I had today led to the identification of the 18 students who are currently in the building who have graduated from this kind of support to either a 504 that has accommodations that don't include supported study hall, or students who continue to have IEPs but are on consult, meaning that they don't have the daily services that most of our IEP students receive. And again, as I've previously mentioned, we only have 5 students in the building who have supported study who are also in a non-supported study hall. And I think that is a testament to the commitment of this district to meet the needs of these students and the incredible choreography that goes into making sure that all of these students are having their needs met on a daily basis. So another piece of data that we pulled was a glimpse into our use of win-win in the building. And this is really an incomplete picture at this point. There's so much that we could be spotlighting when it comes to how our use of win-win, including the variety of reasons that it's being used, the departments by whom it's being used, the trends in grades for students who are called more frequently than others. That's going to have to be part of a future, perhaps win-win dedicated presentation. But for the time being, what I can share is that this has been our trend in win-win requests over the course of this academic year. So when we started in September, for the month of September, we had just under 500 total win-win requests. And for the month of March, we were just shy of, I think it was 1,900 requests. There are no data points on this graph for November or December. Based on teacher feedback, we changed how we were tracking win-win. When we started the year, we were using a Google form that automatically generated a spreadsheet that ended up being very different from the spreadsheet that Zach Arnold made that offered a few features that our previous model didn't. And then it wasn't until January that we figured out how to track the totals using that spreadsheet. So this is a glimpse in how it's in the volume of use in terms of how it's being used. I think every teacher you ask in this building would give you a different answer. It's both a window of time that is used for intervention whether that's because of missed learning or reteaching or retakes of assessments, to enrichment opportunities. Just a snapshot of what's been happening recently. We had Nigel Pitt here just before break to share with students an overview of the math classes that they can take once they have maxed out the math offerings of the OHS math department. Coming up, we have a presentation coordinated by Jill Conley to share with students with accommodations, how to access accommodations at the post-secondary level. In addition to that, Win-Win is used for increased rehearsal time in advance of performing arts performances. It is used for club meetings when the convening of the club isn't possible after school or before school. It is being really, it's being used in many different ways, and in increasingly diverse ways as needs arise. Another piece of data that I pulled to offer characterization of our learning reality is our class size trends for the last 3 years. These are for semester 2. So we have seen some shifts. The 30+ classes are performing arts classes. In 2021, spring of 2021, we didn't have any performing arts classes running, so that number is 0. Last year, band was our only class that had more than 30 students, and this year, band and choir are the 2 classes with more than 30 students. So I previously described PRIV in our data gathering last spring. We learned that accessing PRIV was the driving priority for students when thinking about what their priorities are for a schedule. 58.9% of students said that that was something that they wanted to have happen for themselves. So we don't have an existing metric for tracking this specifically, and so this data is a bit uneven. But this gives you some sense of the number of students who are accessing PRIV in 11th and 12th grade for the past 4 falls. So fall of 20, we didn't have any students accessing PRIV, and for some reason we didn't have any 12th grade data from the fall of 21. But you can see that there has been a decrease in PRIV over the course of the last few years, and that is something about which we are curious. We aren't sure if it's because students are taking more classes or if it's because fewer students have been eligible. So one of the concerns, as I mentioned previously, with the schedule change was what would happen to our performing arts enrollment because of the change in schedule away from the 9-block schedule and to an 8-block schedule. So we pulled our performing arts enrollments for the past 4 years. Well, not quite exactly, because as I mentioned, the 2020-2021 school year, we didn't have any performing arts classes, so that we don't have enrollments for those for that year. But pre-COVID, our enrollments are in the far left column. And then we have the enrollments for the last 2 years. And then the numbers in the far right column are students who have requested our performing arts classes for next year. So we have had robust conversations about what some of the factors playing into this might be. Jenna Costa has been a great resource for providing those insights. And in addition, we have, continued investment in making sure that we protect performing arts access for students. And so part of the data gathering was considering specifically the drop in band enrollment from last year to this year. So last year we had 51 students who were in band. This year we have 35 students in band. And so we went student to student to try to find out, what is the reason that you have opted to not do band this year. And this gives you a sense of how wide those explanations are. We were committed to maintaining this block as a non-compete block, meaning that only performing, only classes that were also offered during other periods could be scheduled during that this year's Maroon 3 when performing arts happens. We were successful in that effort. For all but one class, we do have one class, AP World History, that was scheduled alongside the performing arts classes during that block. But that was a decision that was made because it was the only period that would allow students to access that class. And it didn't present conflicts for the performing arts classes. So there are no students who wanted to do performing arts and AP World History. And, you know, our goal is for it to be a completely non-compete block so that if students were to change their mind and decide, you know, post-build that they wanted to take both performing arts and that class, that wouldn't be an obstacle for them. So for co-curricular performing arts enrollment, we thought that this was an important piece of data to capture to help support the full picture of performing arts in the building. So this is a perspective on, for the past 5 years, what has performing arts enrollment look like season by season. There were a few times when there wasn't anything running. The spring of 21, you may remember the combined OHS and OMS performance in the OMS parking lot. But I think that the numbers in this slide really reflect the commitment of this district to supporting student access to the performing arts and the incredible hard work that our performing arts faculty and advisors do to continue to make these opportunities available for our kids. So other obstacles, things that might be getting in the way while students are in class. One factor that emerged as something for deeper consideration is the rate of suspensions in the district, in particular this year. So as you can see, we chart here both total suspensions as of the end of Q3. So any suspensions that happened during Q4 weren't a part of this data. But the total rate of suspensions, and then three primary reasons for which students are being suspended. The line across the bottom, or the bullet at the bottom left, is suspensions for disrespect, which you can see has had a slight increase this year. Above that, suspensions for fighting or threatening to fight. And then above that, something that there's been a lot of conversation about, suspensions for possession or use of substances. So alcohol and vape as two of the big ones.
I'm sorry, Meredith, what is the top line, the light blue one?
The top line is total suspensions. So total suspensions for each of the past 4 years up until the end of the Q3. The bottom three don't account mathematically for those totals because there are varied reasons. Rather than trying to illustrate all of them, I just chose the three most frequent. Miranda Devonish-Benefield, in her capacity as our student success ed tech, has been really indispensable in finding ways to look at and try to understand where students are struggling in this building. And one of the pieces of data that she has been pulling periodically over the course of the year are the rates of D's and F's. And this has helped us really sort of get a sense of trends over the course of a quarter of, students who are struggling. We're not at the point yet of conducting meaningful analysis of the data over time, but we took this snapshot. So for Q3, we pulled the number of D's and F's of students in the building. So this graph represents the number of students across all grades who have 1 D or F, the number who have 2, 3, and then 4. In our initial pull of this data, we included students who have essentially stopped attending. And after our faculty meeting, during which we shared this information, we eliminated those students. So these numbers only reflect students who are regularly attending school. And we looked for other sort of meaningful facets of this. And the one real intriguing number that we discovered was that of the 56 Ds that students across the building had for Q3, 32 of them were in math. Which, you know, if you were in attendance for, you know, the data presentations that, you know, we have been sharing since the spring of 2020, the idea that math is a challenge post-COVID is no secret. But Miranda dug even further to try to figure out, you know, what should we be making of this? And something that that she learned was that distribution of Ds across our classes shows that really it's our students who are not in our B level math class. So for the uninitiated, we have AP honors level math classes, and then we have what we call A level math classes, which are essentially, you know, college prep, typical college prep math classes, and then B level math classes for students for whom math is a struggle or for whom there have been significant gaps. And it's students in those A level math classes who have the highest percentage of Ds. So this is something that the math department was surprised to learn, and conversations among our math faculty have begun about, you know, what does this mean? And, you know, Miranda pulled the data for teachers with the nuance that divides them across classes and illustrates student by student. So that, you know, that has begun a conversation for our math department that we're hoping will help us address, you know, this pocket of need in the building.
My guess is that difference isn't statistically significant though, between the A and the B level.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mark.
So my guess is the difference in Ds and Fs between the B level math classes and the A level math classes isn't statistically significant. They're the same statistically. I would guess. I mean, just looking at the raw fractions, you know, there's a statistical difference between people in AP and the other two categories, but A and B is essentially a statistical wash.
Mhm.
So rather than focusing on the A, it should be focusing on the A and the B.
Oh, well, I didn't mean to imply that they're focusing on the A. I just meant to underscore that this is something now that, so teachers with this data have it for their specific classes. And so they are able to look, consider it both individually for their individual students and then as a department. You know, but this corresponds with deep math curricular work that has been happening with the support of Susan, in particular, since I think it was the end of March, Susan. Our math department has been meeting for a full block every other day, talking about math curriculum. And one of the questions that has come up is how our revised programming for next year fits into the equation, right? With the differentiated math pathways that, you know, reflect that students studying different things have different needs mathematically. And also that I think that there is a sense in the department that our B-level math programming in particular deserves some rethinking, without a specific identification of what that looks like or what it should be, but just a desire collectively to reflect on it in a way that, you know, may reveal some changes that they would like to make. So I appreciate for sure the math department's willingness to consider not only this, you know, future of math curriculum in the department, but simultaneously, what is this experience of our students now, and how can our conversation about now inform our conversations about what's to come? So something that our faculty is unanimous in is a belief that our students need more support. And when I think back on, schools pre-COVID, it feels like there has been a profound shift in the role that school plays in meeting the needs of the whole student. And how that manifests day to day is both an appreciation for how students' mental health impacts their ability to learn, and the challenge of meeting mental health needs in a way that addresses them for every student, because I don't know a building in the state of Maine right now that feels like they have ample mental health support for kids. Currently, we have 2 groups that are meeting on a regular basis. We have a core DBT group meeting for 80 minutes a week, and a social skills group facilitated by our professionals meeting 40 minutes a week. And for individual counseling, Kelly and BJ see 50 students in the building for between 30 and 90 minutes a week. We currently have 2 OHS kids on the wait list. And for case management, we have 6 OHS students who are serving case management services. I pulled this data just for our building. This is a slice of what the need is across the district. And I'm sure that each of our buildings could tell you stories about how the profound needs that kids have feel like a real struggle to meet these days.
And also, Meredith, if I could add, there's many students that are receiving it outside of these services as well. So there's many families and students that are receiving those same services, but not by our staff themselves, but by outside support service agencies.
Absolutely. So when we share this data with faculty, these are the 4 questions that we posed to them at the conclusion. And we asked for their thoughts on these questions, and those were generated in small group discussions and then shared via Google Slides. And I've synthesized those responses to try to capture the spirit of the faculty conversation about some of these questions. When we think about the work that we have done toward meeting some of those goals from last year, faculty observations are that Win-Win has been a positive intervention, but we need to continue making improvements in order to use it to maximum impact. Some faculty were glad that we're coming back and reviewing what the outcomes were for some of the changes that we made in order to understand both their impacts and how we can continue to improve. And then there was a lot of conversation about how to account for win-win minutes in our overall calculation of the use of time in the building. There are some folks who consider win-win minutes study hall minutes. There are some folks who say that we should be counting win-win minutes for students who are not on a daily basis using win-win as study hall minutes in some sort of overall calculation. But that was a hot topic for discussion. In terms of the question about what other data should we be gathering, folks were eager for a perspective on the trends for D's and F's from Q1 and Q2, and ideally this is something that we would be able to offer a perspective on for the entire year. There was discussion about late work, and that's something that kind of ties into other bullets later, but folks were interested in the percentage of students who are not handing in things on time and handing them in at the end of the quarter. The rate of students who leave class, students who are called for Win-Win but are not reporting for Win-Win. They are curious about if there are trends in our AP and honors class enrollment and if there are declines in that. They were wondering about the use of the time of our school counselors, and the fact that on any given day, students who don't have regularly scheduled time with our counselors or our social work folks, or who are in crisis outside of their designated windows, often end up in our guidance office in need of support. And Teachers were curious about the amount of time that our school counselors are spending supporting students in crisis versus the academic planning and future planning work that school counselors also spend a lot of time on. Folks were curious about our rates of priv access and if there was a reason for the decline. And then they were also curious about period to period attendance data. And I'll get to that a little bit more in the next slide. When we look at student needs that are not being met, a lot of it is around this question of what some folks might call COVID impacts on the whole student and the whole student's preparedness to learn. In other circles, that conversation might be focused on the social and emotional needs of our students and how those needs are an interruption to learning that we should be grappling with more deliberately. Some folks lamented the loss of social time for students that Muse offered. There were some students who viewed Muse as sort of a 50-minute social time break during the day. Some folks lament the loss of that. A number of suspensions for substance abuse and just, observations about students in the building lead to some folks asserting that really we need more support for students who are struggling with substance abuse. There was talk about students' sense of responsibility and willingness to engage in rigorous work, and academic maturity is a phrase that was also used, and the idea that for some teachers, this is something that has suffered significantly because of the pandemic, and there's a sense of not really knowing what to do about that, right? If students aren't completing work, what is our responsibility to holding them accountable versus our responsibility to understanding that it may be a consequence of social and emotional needs? Teachers talked about how instruction has slowed from pre-pandemic levels in order to meet students where they're at, students having learning gaps, students having difficulty with engagement and endurance for engagement. Teachers also talked about their observation that students seem to have a poor understanding of what healthy boundaries are. And, we could probably trace the cause of that in a number of directions, but they see that as an obstacle in the building, and they've identified that as a need for specific instruction. How to account for student social and emotional well-being in the classroom. So we've looked at the number of students with 504s for mental health needs. We've looked at the number of students with IEPs, and many of those students have built into their accommodations the need for breaks. For some students, it's a walk break. For some students, it's a mental health break from engagement in class. And that has created for some teachers a frustration around how do I provide sustained and focused instruction if I have, X percentage of my classroom needing to take breaks at certain times? How do I both sustain rigor and hold students accountable while also making sure that their needs are being met? And finally, teachers highlighted that their perceived need for more social work services. So as we look to next year, we asked folks to identify what should we be working on and thinking about. There was an emphasis on the need for support for staff mental health and morale, and the idea that it's not just our students struggling, it's everyone, and we should be doing more to support that. Faculty expressed a desire for more time to talk with and work with one another on curriculum and on other things, including problem solving and sharing, concerns about behaviors and student needs and strategizing ways to meet them. Folks expressed a desire for us to evaluate how our early release day schedule runs. Currently, we include win-win time in early release day schedules, and there were some folks who argued that win-win should be excluded from early release and it should be instructional time only. Folks expressed a desire for focused work and instruction around boundaries and how students can conduct themselves more professionally. And then finally, there was a reflection on the way in which we have organized different initiatives and a desire for more deliberate and focused planning of initiatives. This, of course, next year will be complicated by the fact that we will have our decennial NEASC visit in March of next year, and that will be something for which we will have to begin preparing pretty much as soon as the 23-24 school year begins. So I know that's a lot of information. Thank you for your patience and your willingness to listen. And, you know, as I said, this is a living portrait that we hope will inform our work in the weeks and months and maybe even years to come. And so at this point, I'd like to open the floor for discussion and questions and thoughts.
No, go ahead. Yeah, thanks, that was a lot of information, it really gives me, I mean, I'm still an outsider in high school and sort of, but it gives me a lot more information, sort of what's going on and what you're struggling with. And I was taking notes, I have a number of just questions and clarifications and things that would be helpful, and I'm kind of have to go through all of it, but I want to actually start with one question I had, about, you know, in the end, you're talking about like the social emotional needs, the lack of sort of responsibility and taking ownership. And I guess I'm wondering, is part of the conversation in like instructional mode for these courses, you know, I think, you know, I'm just coming from me teaching my own work, which, and I don't want to like say that's how it should be done at this level because it's a different thing, but you know, for my classes, I see some of the same struggles, and this year I've shifted towards a much more project-based small group. When I saw you put a group work in there, I thought you meant the group work in classes, but that's not what you meant. But that did give me this idea, which is like, you know, in my course this year, 75% of the class time is really just the students working in small groups on their projects, and it's like the social like connection that they're having, the engagement, it's like bringing them in and making them feel responsible and doing a lot of work on some of these like emotional needs and sort of lack of maturity that I think is really important. So I guess my question is this sort of instructional mode of delivery part of the conversation about how to solve some of these social emotional needs and responsibility and other things like that? Like I mean, I know it's a lot to develop those sort of active learning, project-based, group-based work, but I do think that it can form and help create engagement in a way in an environment and a school that draws people in, draws kids in, and maybe can sort of solve some of those ways in an ancillary way. So I don't know, does that make sense or?
No, it totally makes sense. And, you know, I think that you're connecting dots between pieces of our work in the building that have corresponded with one another, but perhaps not as specifically as you're identifying. When NEASC came last year and you know, took our self-reflection report and calibrated it alongside their observed experience, one of their observations was that they saw opportunity in our class size and our class organization for increased group learning like you're talking about, and you know, upside down planning, different strategies as compared to what they observed as a more traditional mode of instruction, not across the building, but in pockets in the building for sure. And so that is something that we identified in our as one of our priority areas. And so that idea of using class size to our advantage and you know, thinking outside of the box with respect to the variety of instruction students experience over the course of the day is a conversation that has been happening, but not necessarily in response to the question of increased responsibility, professional conduct, and the social and emotional needs of students. So I think that is that's a fantastic observation for a way to bring what we are identifying as perhaps discrete needs together toward a solution.
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, having experience in this year, I absolutely think that can help solve those problems. So
thank you, Noah.
And it takes work, but yeah. I guess I got other questions.
Why don't you do one more and then we'll pass it around?
All right, just a real quick one. I'll come back to my other one. So Priv, you explained how you get it, but I still don't understand what it is, what they're doing in that time. What is it?
So it's essentially come late or leave early. for one block. So students are, if a student has priv, then that means that they either arrive one block late every other day, or they leave one block early every other day. Students use that for varied purposes, but having a designated purpose is not a requirement for priv. It's something that students can access by nature of being an 11th or 12th grader, having one of those blocks free in their schedule, and having a GPA above a certain level.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll ask another question.
I have a number of comments, mostly just super excited and jazzed to see this. The whole idea of setting goals and then coming back in and checking how you did against the goals as a staff together, I just think is fantastic. I think education often misses what business has about this notion of continuous improvement, right? That we can always be striving to do better, even if we're already doing a great job. And this kind of culture of accountability and check-in around goals, I think it's just a fantastic tool. So that really excites me. I love that it's data-driven, and I equally much love that it's data-driven, not just towards some, we had test score, but across the whole spectrum. I really feel like your presentation matched well against the 3 student growth and achievement goals, right? The whole person, social, emotional, grit, and, the whole range of student achievement goals that we have set, rather than just a simple one-dimensional academic score. So that's super exciting, and I think that's to be commended. Makes me glad that we put at least a little bit of money in for a data analyst for next year's budget. I think that's targeted for DEI, but it's not very hard for me to imagine, quickly occupying the plate of a data analyst for all, because I imagine a lot of that data you collected was pretty painfully hand collected when it exists in a database somewhere. So
Especially for a former English teacher.
well, we can't make the English teacher into a database scientist, but we could let them work with a database scientist. So. Yeah, so just a huge thank you. I mean, you nailed it, but the ongoing challenges of social emotionally from COVID are just deep and pervasive. I think everybody sees that. As Noah mentioned, we see that. We are having this conversation at the university all the time too. I imagine flight attendants are having this conversation, right? Flight people are just master to each other in the whole walk of the world. It's our job as educators to actually change that, not just deal with it. But so I appreciate the attention to that. As a parent of 2 kids who went through the high school and dozens of kids coming through my house, I will strongly assert that win-win hours are not the same as study hall hours. Study hall hours, there were some kids who used them well, there were some teachers who used them well, but by and large, they were much less structured and much less productive than win-win. Really wanted to echo the kind of sensitivity, and maybe I'm sensitive because my wife just was a school counselor, worked as a school counselor, but school counselors are put in an incredible role where they, have a full-time job, just getting kids scheduled and into the right classes and resolving technical issues, and trying to deal with the social emotional needs. And we're increasingly beefing up the social emotional side with social workers and things. But as you say, if you're not on the list and don't have an appointment, they still end up at the school counselor's door, sometimes in crisis, and they can't wait. So just not just a deep appreciation of school counselors and what they do and what that job entails. Another thing that jumped out at me, well, going back to the data and the continuous growth, I appreciate the faculty and staff engaging with your questions and reflecting on your questions. That was very powerful, and I was really appreciating seeing that. Jumped out at me probably mostly because it showed up so many times in the board survey as well, but the word rigor. Where this comes from as a goal for a high school, what it means. I just find it curious. It's not a goal. I don't think if you ask parents, their primary goal is rigor. I don't think as a board, we talk about rigor as a primary goal. So I'm just curious. You don't necessarily have to do that in the moment on the spot, but I'm just curious to start unpacking why we hear from teachers a lot about rigor and what that actually means. And if that does overlap with goals that we all share, or if that's a set of goals that are unique to teachers. So those are some quick thoughts, but mostly just really want to celebrate the work that you did pulling this together, and I know you had help from other people pulling it together, and the work that the faculty and staff did in engaging with this and kind of setting themselves up in a continuous growth mindset of setting goals, testing themselves against goals in a data-driven way. And that's how the world gets better. That's a fantastic accomplishment to be doing that. I'll just go back to the scheduling, that asking an administrator to take on a schedule overhaul is like asking somebody to grab a circular saw. It's never going to come out well, but you did it bravely, and I really think you captured a lot of nuggets out of that. And there's a direct line from that process you led to the schedule revisions that are having some of the salutary effects that are happening today. So I wanted to appreciate and particularly commend you for making those changes. Somewhere 5 years from now, I'd still love to revisit matching up colors to weekdays. It wasn't just college kids taking college classes. It was kids taking EMT classes at EMC, the community college. It was kids who were lucky enough to have a private therapist and wanted to be able to set up a weekly appointment with a doctor for physical therapy or something like that. There are still profound reasons to get to that, but that I think that's a 5-year goal. That's not a next year goal for sure. But wanted to appreciate the work that has happened on schedules. Kevin, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Brian. And likewise, I'll certainly, thank Meredith and the people that worked with her on this data analysis. There's a lot of work that went into this, that's clear. A couple observations. Certainly, I'll echo what Brian says about rigor. And some of these comments are sort of directed towards the presentation, Meredith, too. They're not necessarily directed at you, the presenter. When I hear about professionalism in high school, I also get a similar spidey sense that Brian gets around rigor, because professionalism involves getting up and walking around. I've had lots of jobs where I can get up and walk around most of the day. And so I do think there has to be a grain of salt when some educators talk about professionalism in the classroom. Classrooms aren't professional places. Students don't have a lot of choice or agency to get up and go to the bathroom without asking. I don't ask my bosses when to go to the bathroom or to take a walk or fill my water bottle or these kinds of things. So anyway, to that end too, thinking about the transition, high school, I think K through 12 is pretty challenging in general, right? But high school, you start with 13 or 14-year-olds, and by the time you see them off, at the end of next month, many of them will be voting members of society off to jobs, careers, and college. That's a tremendous, arc of life. And some of the, those seniors who are graduating this year, they're going to spend about a third of their week in the fall actually in the classroom. The rest of the time, they'll be able to work on schoolwork, grab a cup of coffee with a friend, hit the rec center. So the amount of classroom time, which I certainly don't equate with instructional time. As a college instructor, I really hope there's instructional time happening outside of the classroom. Otherwise, I'm doomed. So, recognizing that there's only 50-minute periods a week that most students will actually be in a classroom. And so, well, maybe for a first-year high school student, that's inappropriate. But I'm less worried about seeing seniors, especially seniors with a decent GPA, having a lot of, I don't know, we can call it many things, downtime, non-instructional. I don't like non-instructional time. I think all time is pedagogical. So, but the big things are this tension between what the world is and then what school is. And recognizing that, I don't know, the professionalism thing too. Again, I know that's not something that you brought up, but it really grates on me. If we want them to be professional, we would have to treat them as professionals. And I don't think very many people are willing to do that. That would require a lot of agency to students. They wouldn't have to ask to go to the bathroom anymore, right? So that's a little ranty. I'll yield the floor. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark or Jake, anything?
I've got just a couple of couple of questions, but I'll start with kind of echoing what Brian said and what Kevin said, and just kind of thank Meredith and those that worked with her on these efforts to revamp the schedule of OHS. I think it was a huge lift, and what's been done so far is in my opinion, resulted in huge improvement, and hopefully we'll keep going on that front. So great job on that. 3 quick questions. Maybe we don't have answers for them, but I'd just like to throw them out there. The first is, I'm wondering, Meredith, if you have any thoughts on why kind of the slope of win-win requests seem to start going up so dramatically from January to March, right? I mean, I know you said you didn't have, I think it was November or December data, but it seems like from January to March, the number of increases has spiked. And maybe it's because there are some rehearsals, because there are end of the year concerts and stuff coming up. And you mentioned that win-win is sometimes used for that, but do you have any thoughts on why things went up so much?
Well, I think it's, I mean, it's speculative for sure without, digging into like, categorizing, the different types of requests that are made and, whether they correspond with events. But I think that, when we brainstormed this idea of an intervention/enrichment block, we had hopes for what it would become. And the designation of it as a what I need, what you need, right? Like there's an infinite ambiguity in that name. Because what you need is going to change day to day, and what your perception of your needs are as a student may differ from my perceptions of your needs as your teacher. And I think that anytime there is a utilitarian resource that's offered, there's the possibility that it is going to become indispensable. And the likelihood of that indispensability, hinges on, whether it is protected and whether it is held at the center of things and whether it is revisited and revised. And, we have tried to do those things. And I think that as a result, it has become something that people realize makes other things possible. And how many other things it makes possible is as varied as there are people in this building. In one of my conversations with a teacher today, we were talking about the impact of, this is Kathy Van Dolman, we were talking about the impact of win-win for students who have IEPs, and how for students with IEPs, win-win is the time that teachers are guaranteed to be available for extra support. And how, as a supported study hall teacher, there is a threshold of support that can be offered, right? Where you have, okay, so, Algebra 1B, English 9, I'm there with you. I can help you with these things. But then there's at some point a crossover from what that supported study hall teacher or support staff member feels competent with, and then what they don't feel competent with. And before, if you have a student with an IEP who's an AP Calculus, then the best you can do is offer some executive functioning support and scaffolding to help that student at some point in some place connect with that teacher. But with win-win, it's a guarantee that the limits of the special ed teacher or the support staff member do not determine the kind of support that the student can access. And so that's all just to say that, my hope would be that the ways in which we're using win-win will continue to expand, that it will continue to make possible in the building things that previously were not possible, and that will then further accelerate the slope on that graph.
That's great. I thought this was a great idea when you first launched it. I like it even more now. So I think digging into those data as resources become available to do that and try and figure out what it's being used for and how it can continue to be refined and improved is great. So thank you on that. My next question has to do with the performing arts music offerings. First of all, did the schedule request from students for academic year 23-24, does that include incoming freshmen at this point?
Yes, that includes all students who are anticipated enrolled for next year.
Okay. So we're continuing to see decline then, on those numbers. And I think we really need to, think seriously about ways to reverse that decline. And I worry that there might be some people who are going to just kind of attribute it to COVID and then move on. But if you look at the numbers, it's not just attributable to COVID, right? There's been a real meaningful decline, particularly, orchestra remains low, right? So that's not a decline, that's too low, in my opinion. We need to look at why it's so low. But there's been a real meaningful decline, significant decline in band and chorus, and we need to look at why that's happening and what steps can we take to try and increase student participation in that. We're a district that values the performing arts and has long had robust performing arts participation, and something happened, and we need to figure out, in my opinion, try and figure out why that is.
That is an ongoing conversation with us and the Performing Arts Department. This is something that, so the numbers that you have there are for the 3 primary performing arts classes that happen during that protected block, right? So the orchestra, choir, and band. But we also have other performing arts courses that are offered at other points during the day. And the decline that you're noting is significant in those classes as well. And so this is a conversation that we had at the beginning of this year with our performing arts faculty. We had a couple of classes that were potentially not going to run, but then through recruitment, specifically by our performing arts faculty at the beginning of the year, were able to run. And we're revisiting that question right now for next year, right? Because for those other performing arts classes, we're in a similar situation. And, part of the reason for, or really the primary reason for that slide that has, the specific student answers was getting just to that, right? Like, what are the factors that are at work? Knowing, of course, that, there are certain things that students will and won't disclose to, their building principal asking them these kinds of questions. But, our hope, we are so proud of the performing arts in this district, and we are committed to doing everything that we can to keep them growing. And that is, one of the driving forces behind, the gathering of this data in the first place, for sure.
Thank you. Last thing I'll say, and then yield the floor to Jake or whomever else has questions. So I think and I'm sure that this is already being done, but it's probably worth noting that there should be a fair amount of attention being placed relatively quickly on why the number of suspensions is going up so much. That I'm sure you're already doing that, but it's probably time to get a bunch of people trying to wrap their brain around that. So that's obviously not a good thing.
No, that is something that I don't know, Sam, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
So yeah, the increase really is in substance abuse. To be quite frank with you, I really am proud to work in a district and with support from all levels of administration to that, suspension is not the answer to a misbehavior or poor choice. I really try to do natural consequences, use restorative practice within my office when possible, and keep kids in school and really try to help them learn, and adapt their behaviors in a different manner and to get their needs met in a different way, knowing that sending them home is not going to help our situation and just will basically repeat that pattern over and over again. So the suspensions that I have been giving this year are for ones that are fights, substance abuse, substance abuse, either use or having the substance on them or giving it away within school. It's not like I don't suspend people for swearing, for disrespect, for, I try to, teach and model and change that behavior with them and with their teachers and others involved. So, but what I have been trying to do, and Lisa Smith's been working with us and the school counselors, as well as much as not as much as the school counselors, the social workers, trying to find substance abuse counseling for teenagers in this area is extremely difficult. Most of the substance abuse counseling is going towards adults in our state at the current moment, but we keep trying to work with Acadia and other service providers to meet that need. Additionally, whenever I suspend a student for substance abuse needs or issues, which really there's only been one for alcohol, all the rest have been vape. and vaping of some substance. Only one was alcohol. And so when I do that, I talk to the families and the students. If they have a counselor, I speak to the counselor about the incident. If they don't, I highly, highly recommend that and give an opportunity for referrals inside or out. What I'm finding is those that don't want the counseling and we can't force it. I have also revisited due to a suggestion, having a possibility of a police dog come and visit our school. However, I'm not going to say this to the students, but what I was told by our SRO is not so sure that the police dogs are trained or can do the vape objects. So it may not help us, but the kids don't need to know that. But, you know, maybe just trying to dissuade them from bringing it to school. But I think what I see is that there's an increase of substance use out in the communities and in the families, and thus we're seeing an increase of that as a coping skill and a use in our students. But I am proud that we don't just put a kid out. Like we try very hard to keep our kids in school and work with them and teach them, as we can, to be able to be a part of our school culture and our school community. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where we're at right now.
Thank you.
Anything you want to say?
Well, it's funny that Mark mentioned the suspension thing, because that's the one thing I wrote down, so I won't repeat that too much. But Sam, can you give me, like, what's an example of, and it's the fewest amount of suspensions, but like, what would be an example of like a suspension for disrespect?
For disrespect?
Yeah, like what would a student do that would fall into the category of disrespect? Like, what would that look like, I guess?
So those disrespect ones are often ones that are in relation to an IEP plan. And so if a student has, most of those on there, I there's ones, and I should say this too, there are numerous students that are more than one of those suspensions is for one kid. Like there's one kid that's been suspended 3 or 4 times. And so that also, those numbers aren't one per one individual student per number. But what a disrespect one would be that I can think of right off the top of my head is in the IEP, if the student refuses to go to the place they're supposed to go, is disrespectful, is swearing, is possibly pushing things around, is, I'm not going to do that, whatever, then they come to my office. I try to work with them. I try to get them to, give them some space and then turn their behavior around and get back to the classroom. If it's impossible or they're still breaking that rule, they're out. And so those are what the disrespect ones are. And the terminology on the form is a little weak. So I usually have a description as to why. And when I talk to them, I explain it. But when we have to pick a word to identify, that's the word we use. But most of the other times though, if a kid, and to be honest, sometimes staff, rightfully so, are frustrated. They're like, this kid was swearing at me. I understand, but I'm not gonna want to try to work with them. So it is really usually extreme against an IEP behavior plan, in which that is what the team agreed upon, and the kid gets to that point and I got to send them home.
Yeah, I mean, Mark's right. When you look at, like, if you look at 1920 would be pre-COVID. So the suspensions in all 3 categories are up since COVID. So, and then I just had 2 points of appreciation that I had written down. One is I'm appreciative of everybody who put the work into this. And I realize it took a team to do this. And then the other thing I'm appreciative of is it's one thing to do the work, but it's another thing to circle back to the work a year later. And that kind of puts you in a vulnerable position because you're taking an honest look at, hey, we made this change and how did things go, and taking an honest look at it. So I appreciate that as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just go quickly because I have a couple of follow-ups and then to you. On the performing arts, I mean, it strikes me there's could be a couple things going on. One is there are more academic arts offerings, in particular women, academic theater offerings rather than just after school. Right, so that could be drawing some numbers off. I suspect almost certainly is drawing some numbers off. On the chorus number, it looks like a drop from 45, but I don't know if that number is inflated. Or if you take that 45 out, it was really 30 the year before. It doesn't look like a drop in chorus. Because
If you go back, even like, we don't have the data here. If you think back to previous years, the chorus was much bigger.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's been a real decline.
Which gets me to the other point is I think one of the constructs of Muse was you could take band 3 days or orchestra 3 days a week and chorus 2 days a week, which had its pros and cons, right? Let a student have multiple performances, but it also meant that they were walking out of band class 2 days a week when the band teacher had other kids for 2 days a week. So I think, does that construct still exist, or are students now just enrolling in a single class?
Students have the option to enroll, and this distinction isn't in the data as presented, but they have the option to enroll in each of the performing arts classes, either for a full credit or a half credit. Students who enroll in the half credit participate in one performing arts class for the first half of the block, and then the other performing arts class for the second half of the block. And this is something that we, when we were considering potential schedules last year, it was suggested that we reach out to MDI to find out their use, because they have a 40% participation rate in the performing arts. And so we wanted to see how they were doing what they were doing. And so this model actually follows their model. The exception is that they have 3 pieces of their performing arts block. We only have 2 because we don't have any students who do both band and orchestra. We have students who do band and choir or orchestra and choir. And so we have choir in its own block, and then band and orchestra or its own half. And then the idea was that the half that teachers had only part of their students for could be used for sectionals, individual instruction, or, small group rehearsals. So we do still have that.
Okay, so that's not an explanation, but I think the theater offerings could be the other thing, and this just makes me sad, but universities enrollment in humanities is plummeting, and I think students are just for many reasons, probably rational reasons, increasingly focused on career relevant skills. And I see a lot of things about wanting to take AP classes, wanting to take college classes and things like that. I think kids are, probably because they're having to, just getting much more pragmatic. But so I hope that's not a long-term trend, but it could be a societal trend. The other thing I wanted to just kind of second Noah's point about active learning and group-based learning and participatory learning in the classroom. I don't know how much people are aware, and I'm not making an apples to apples comparison. I know high schools and universities are different, but universities have turned upside down in the last 20 years in terms of how much they moved into these areas of learning, active and group-based and some of these kinds of things. And the literature just so strongly supports it. The learning supports it, the student engagement and supports it, and as Noah is getting at, it is workplace training, because when you go to and Kevin was getting at this too, when you go to the workplace, you don't sit there and listen to the boss and take notes. You sit there and you work in small groups with people trying to solve problems. So I think there's lots of wins to be had there. So just wanted to second that point from Noah and Kevin. So, and Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, it'd be great to see. I don't know that developing more what we can do to support that, but something we've been all thinking about a lot. So yeah, I guess my only question, we're sort of digging more into, again, trying to understand the win-win block and some of those numbers, just so I kind of understand it. So like for instance, like on any given day, what percentage of students aren't actually doing the active win-win thing versus just, you know what I mean, aren't selected for the win-win block? That's one question I had.
So, and unfortunately, that's not data that I can give you right now. I was working with Jeff Owen on how to pull this, and I wasn't able to finish that part of the project before today. We have
Like 1% versus 99%, like some sense of
I want to say roughly 40 to 50% on any given day for a variety of reasons, right? Both remediation and enrichment. But that is an improvement that I aspire to in future versions of this discussion in order to, maximize the impact of this tool, because it is something that has, one example is we have a Wabanaki Language and Culture Club that is being led by Wabanaki students who all do sports after school. And so after school is not an option for running this club. Instead, they have been meeting during win-win. They have offered Penobscot language instruction. They have offered a drumming performance. It is something that they are finding uses for that time for in a way that continues to evolve, and finding more ways to make more things possible is one of the goals. And I think that having a better understanding of how the period is being used is going to be a key to maximizing that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, and, yeah, and it looked like based on the numbers, it was sort of overall like an 8% increase in the just the actual class time that students are having or something like that. Sort of generally what I'm getting, at. And part of my question, so that's because the classes are longer, is there a difference in the number of courses that students are enrolling in comparing across the years? Or like, you said they can enroll in 6 or different numbers, but that's my question.
So we have had a long-standing requirement that students enroll in 6 courses. But when we pulled this data last spring, we realized that was not something that was being adhered to with fidelity. And so that one pivot that we have made is ensuring that all students are enrolled for 6 courses, which means that at maximum students can have one study hall period per day. That has had an impact. In addition, another missing piece of this picture is our early college enrollment for this year. We've seen snapshots of that in the data presentations over the past couple of semesters, but that's another picture that I would like to offer more fully. And one of the, as Brian pointed out, one of the challenges of our schedule is that it doesn't align. And so a student to take a university class needs to block out two blocks, 2 OHS blocks in order to make sure that they can access class. And that is something that we translate in a way that we are trying to keep it apples to apples, because students earn a full credit in one semester at the university, whereas it takes them a full year to earn a credit here. So we do have some students who will enroll in, so like, for example, if an OHS student is enrolled in 5 classes here on campus, but 1 class at the university, that actually translates to 7 credits over the course of the year, because that 1 university credit counts twice for the semester. And so that also has had an impact, because we do have increased early college enrollment, and that there's more an impact for each university class than for each OHS class.
Thanks, yeah.
Anything else? That was a very deep dive, but deeply appreciated and really, really super exciting, and commendations to everybody who made that happen. I think we're ready to move on to staff nominations. We have just a co-curricular nomination. I would make a motion to approve the slate of co-curricular nominations as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Just to read that for people who are curious, that's the JV baseball position, Griffin Costello at the high school. Any discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Kevin?
Aye.
Thank you. Jake?
Aye.
Noah?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Passes 5-0. Next up, we have some policies. Go ahead and pull these up. So the first one is JLCC, communicable and infectious diseases. This is just part of our rolling update. We checked in with our nurse, Karen Martin, and she basically indicated a piece of our policy was not matching current state regulations, and so we've updated things to match that. We'll see it's all down on the last paragraph in terms of return to school. Bottom line is students didn't always have to get doctors. It depends on it's really complicated. It depends if there's a whole table out there that depending on the disease, whether they have to get a doctor's certificate to return or not return. Depends on how long something stays communicable and other factors like that. So this is updated to match current guidance. So I would make a motion to approve the revision of policy JLCC as presented. Is there a second?
Second,
Any discussion or questions?
When you basically turned it from us to May, is that? Everything was October. Like shall, May.
Yeah,
Right, it's a different kind of type of, what the communicable disease is.
I mean, another way to word it is we're now leaving it would be a nurse's judgment based on the state. Depending on the disease instead of requiring it. Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, we'll go and vote. Kevin,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Noah, aye, Mark,
I,
I also vote aye. It passes. I was doing something funny here, I just lost it.
It's JLCDE.
JLC.
medication.
DE and medication administration on school field trips.
I have hard copies too.
No, I haven't. Same thing. We were just not following current practice or current state guidelines for feedback from our school nurse. And so specifically, the nurse has to approve somebody who's going to administer medications on a field trip rather than having the training certificate for a person who's going to administer medications on a field trip. So
That was the last episode.
what's that?
Oh, sorry. I was talking to the kids.
Oh. Too many conversations to manage. So I would make a motion to approve the revision to policy JLCDE as presented. Is there a second?
in a second,
Any discussion or questions? All vote. Kevin,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Noah, Mark,
Aye.
I also vote aye. Passes 5-0. The last one is a bundle of related policies. I think take them as a group. The bottom line, this is the policy on confidentiality of student education records. Some of this points to state law, some of this points to federal law with FERPA. But we realized our policy had not been updated in a long time. We started comparing with the Drummond and Woodson MSMA recommended policy, and we realized there were enough significant changes. We're just doing it looks like a full swap over, but only about 10 or 20% of it's actually changed. For example, we had a whole section on confidentiality of student social security numbers, and we realized we no longer collect. We used to have to collect it for state reporting. We no longer have to collect it for the state reporting, so we no longer collect it. That's just an example of something that changed. Much of this is verbatim the same as the previous policy, just lined up with the current version. So I would make a motion to approve the revisions to policies JRA, JRA-R, and JRA-E as presented. Is there a second?
a second,
And just to be clear, JRA-R, these are things that are required by the various laws. I think JRA-R is required by state law and JRA-E is required by federal law. But one JRA-E is a notification to parents of FERPA rights. JRA-R is a detailed dive in the state law. But they all say the same thing. So any questions or comments? We'll go ahead and vote. Kevin,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Noah, aye, Mark,
I,
I also vote aye. Passes 5-0. Move on to subcommittee reports, policy subcommittee. You've seen most of our work. We're down to 4 policies to finish our 3-year review cycle. We're gonna have the next meeting will be the first week and a half from now. It'll be the first Thursday of May. Anything from UTC?
We meet next week.
Okay, Spruce?
Nothing to report.
Curriculum subcommittee did not meet, so nothing to report there. Facilities and building committee, nothing new there. I know Bill, I got an email from him while we were sitting here. There's ongoing efforts on those last couple of tweaks in the maintenance warranty period on construction, but as well as lots of work to getting things up and running, but no specific updates. Wellness committee,
Given that we're, the next few weeks or early May, we're hoping to put the outdoor parks from kicking.
Great. DEI leadership, I think, has not met since we last updated, but I know all 5 subcommittees are still doing ongoing work. Is there any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? Now open for public comment. Would anybody like to make a public comment?
Hi, sorry. I just want to say thank you to everybody for the work that they did, but I also just want, as the president of Oscar, I just want to piggyback on what Mark talked about in terms of really supporting our arts programs and building those programs, rebuilding them. I recognize, Brian, what you said about, kids looking at the, academic needs and needing to take AP classes and all the pressure that comes along with that. But I really feel like if our administration and we as a community and as a school community can really promote the value of arts and arts education, that can also help and promote the mental health needs of our kids, and that can maybe help to balance some of what we're seeing. So I just wanted to commend the opportunity and to comment and to say we, as I work with our performing arts staff and all the kids and students, that they're so committed and they're so talented and they're so deserving of any and all efforts that we can use to really build and promote those programs. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Will and should be an ongoing conversation, I'm sure. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Our next meeting is May 9th, 2 weeks from today at 6 p.m. on Zoom and in the library. Is there any request for information or follow-up? I would motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? We'll vote. Kevin?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Noah?
Hi.
Mark?
Aye.
Also vote aye. Passes 5-0. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.